Hello and welcome to the RR Portrait Guide. This guide should be working as far as 2023, and all you'll need to get started is a working copy of Photoshop. We've tested at least 2014 and 2020 versions, but it should work for the other ones in between and later. So what you're going to want to do first, you're going to want to grab your source. So I'm grabbing this purely hypothetical Japanese one here. You're going to want to resize it into the frame. There's no specific sizing requirement, but typically just check that his head is center of frame and there isn't too much clearance on either side. And you can let his hat clip the top, because usually you don't need to depict the entire hat in frame. Here, so like I have a reference there just to help me out. When you think it looks about right, I think a little bit. I think this is right about. Then you need to go over to you want to make sure you have polygonal lasso tool and the magic wand tool. These are what you're going to need to select and deselect things in this style. It's just the way that I find the most efficient. To quickly get a selection around the subject, you select subject at the top. On 2020 version, this is at least the button that is put there, and it'll give you a rough outline of where he is, and you can just fill out the rest, shade out any parts that you don't think belong there, put in any ones that you think do belong. Keep in mind that some sources will have parts that blend into the background, so you want to maybe do some guesswork, maybe just keep a good eye out. I think that looks about right. Now I'm going to do Control-Shift-I, and it will select everything outside of his form. And then I will press Delete. Now the background is gone. I will also press Crop to further crop him out. And then this is just for the PSD that I'm using, bring him in to make the effects work. And now we can actually get started. So, firstly, the main principle of colorizing in the RR style is essentially selecting a particular part of a uniform that has a uniform color, going over to adjustments at the top right, and making a hue saturation mask. Now what that will do is, as you can see, it will make that part of the frame or that part of the subject colored in the certain way that you can adjust. So like this star appears to be either white or yellow. I think I'll make it maybe just a very dim sort of yellow, like you can kind of imperceptibly tell. And so I'm going to adjust the saturation to make it in line with what I think it would be. Adjust the lightness to make sure it's not too overpowering. And then I'm going to hit Control-J. If you look at the bottom right, it will copy a second layer exactly like the first one in the exact same place. And then I'm going to go over, hit Soft Light. And now what Soft Light is going to do is it's going to bring out the contrast. It's going to bring out the shadows. So areas of contrast become like they're properly shaded in the color in the proper image. And the next steps are very simple. You basically repeat that process for every single part that has a different color. So this band will be some sort of leather. I'm sure it'll be brown. Not being too accurate here, just being very thorough. And now what you can do let's say, can't quite make the color you want, you can combine different colors with different hue saturation layers. So the normal layer will be this sort of kind of dingy brown. And then if I copy it, do the soft light, maybe raise that up to make sure it's not too bad, then I can shift the values into a way that I see fit. So let's say that. I think that looks about right. You can always zoom out to see what your work looks like. Now I'm going to do the hat here. It's going to select the whole area. Notice that I'm going over the areas that I've already selected in other masks. And I'll show you why, because there's a quick way of doing this. So you can deselect wide amounts of areas without going individually into each one and reselecting by just right-clicking once on only one of them and doing subtract mask. And it'll subtract that portion, the exact portion that you highlighted, from your selection. Do that for the other one, and then right-click on the guy that you cut out and click Intersect Transparency Mask. Now what that will do is it'll basically snap all of your selection into the parts that are actually physically there. And then we can just fill out the rest. Not looking for accuracy here, so let's say he's doing a bit of a strange rendition on the uniform. Now, for metals and parts that are very intricate, you may make the mistake of trying to polygonally select each area. But this is a big mistake because it will take a long time for very complex uniforms, and it doesn't look that great. And instead, what you can do is you can take a brush, make sure it's selected the hue saturation layer, the one that you're working with, and paint the areas that you think would be the same color. As long as it's a high opacity and as long as it's white, it will paint on the mask the exact way that you want it to. So I know all this is going to be gold, so I'm just going to paint it like so. Okay, that looks about right. Yeah, that looks about right. And then for gold, I typically just do yellow and a soft light that's more orange. Makes it look a bit more metallic-y. And then after that, then you can just do everything in between. I know it's a badge. And just subtract and fill it in. Say it's some sort of gray, so I'll do very light blue, darker, maybe a little taupe, so do a little pinch of that, and there we go. Any irregularities you notice, unless they're major, aren't typically the biggest deal because players are usually going to be looking at them from a very far distance. But it's always good to make sure that things look consistent with uniforms because people do notice differences between uniforms. So if you've got a brown uniform and then another general in the same army is using a white uniform another's using a brown, another's using a gray, blue, green, purple, whatever you have it. You want to make sure that's fairly consistent because people are going to nitpick that. And it's just not that hard to do. You can always transplant. Oh, forgot that. You can always do this. There we go. Going to make reds usually have to be deep reds, so they should be darker and more saturated. Typically adjust them afterwards to make sure they're not too saturated, but just enough to appear rich. From a distance, like I think that looks just about right. Then I'm pretty sure this is the same color as whatever his other thing is, so I'm going to select that. Yeah, that's it. And paint it in. Select that, paint it in. Now to do white, you just do a very light blue and then put the saturation very low and sort of adjust it to look right. A lot of it is just eyeballing. Gives it some contrast, doesn't make it look uncolored, which typically looks bad. I say typically, it looks usually very bad. Alright, looks like all I have left is do his shirt here, which I imagine is going to be a bit of a kind of a dirty gray sort of thing. Yep. And now all that's left is to just do the and now what I can do is just paint it in the same color to make it consistent. And there we go, the uniform is done. We're now halfway there. So you may come across occasionally people with glasses on. Sometimes these glasses are very difficult to do because the sources are bad and they tend to obfuscate where the glasses begin and where they end. Luckily, this one has a very well contrasted black frame, But what you typically do is you just paint in where the glass frame is, or where you think it'll be. Typically this is corrected later. And you just go around it like such. There we go. I think there's actually a little bit I missed. There we go. And now the easiest method is to just turn them black, so give it a deep blue, low contrast, just like with the white and gray, or low saturation, I mean. And just turn the lightness down, and the soft light, make it look about right with the lighting. And that looks true to life. Now what we do is we gotta remember the lenses. Now this part will take some adjustment, take some getting used to exactly how they work, and a lot of it is gonna be recorrected after the skin is done. But I'll set it up now so I don't have to later. Okay, so what I usually do, is I create a new layer of soft light, setting to about 20, let's say 20% for now. And if it's too much, we can always set it down. It's very trial and error depending on what the skin looks like, because some skins drown out the soft light color, which, by the way, with your brush, you want to set the mode on the top to soft light. And then select very light blue and just paint it in. See, that looks too much. We can always do this. And there we go. Oh wait. Okay. Now, it looks very blue because the skin isn't any color yet. So once it's colored, it'll be a much more apparent how much it affects the skin. But anyway, let's not worry about that for now. We're gonna do the eyes first, which are very simple. I'm gonna make them brown, since most likely it's brown. I don't know this guy personally. Just roughly select where the eye is. And now I like to do the reds of the eyes because it, at least I think, it helps the next step, or the next step, a little better. Helps with recognition. To do that, it's not that hard. It's just select the corners of their eyes and just do very light sort of thing. And if you think it's too sharp, you can always go into here, do the blur tool, and just displace it a little bit. There we go. Now, all that's left is, I suppose, the hair. So a big mistake I used to make is I used to just make this angle selection, snap it in, and then just do the hair like that. But what the issue is, if you do it like that, let's make his hair. If you do it like that, it looks very bad, first of all, because no one has hair that's that drastic from skin to hair. So instead, the right thing to do is to take feather and do 1.4 pixels is what I usually do. And that'll make a gradual gradient going from the hair to the skin. And that looks much better. Now, all that's left to do is to select the skin. So just require taking out everything that we've selected thus far. Going up, make sure it's under the glasses, this glasses texture thing, soft light. And because he's Asian, it's going to be a bit more sort of yellowish. Although you can always vary it by like a few points. There's no definite single point average, but I use 29. And now you do soft light. And the soft light, always draw it more towards the red until it looks about right. And now we're in the home stretch. So make a new layer, multiply 60% opacity. Control J, make that third layer that you just copied, soft light, and then Control J one more time. And now you should have 2 layers of soft light, 60%, and 2 layers of multiply, 60%. Now go onto the multiply layer, the very bottom one. Select, add mask to selection for the skin that you just did. Go to your brush, do multiply, and change the brush opacity to 10%. And make sure that the hardness is set to 0, because you're going to want to be really soft for this. Now for the colors, you're going to need 2 main colors. You're going to need, let me set it to default just for the sake of demonstration. You're going to need a red somewhere in the middle, somewhere around the middle. For blushes, lips, highlights for red, make things look more skin tony, because skin tones aren't one color, they're usually warm with red and pink and whatever. You're going to simulate with red here. And now with the other color, go to swatches, and you'll see on the bottom there's a pale folder. This is all for skin tones. The ones we care about, these aren't the ones we care about at the moment. The ones we care about are this one, and this one. So the darker their skin tone is, the darker the swatch needs to be. Usually, most people lie in the middle here, which I think this guy does. Occasionally you'll need darker than that, and sometimes people are very pale and they need that. So let's get to work. First things first, bottom layer, let's take our red out and just start painting. You're going to want to do singular strokes, so press the mouse button down and just move along once, because you don't want to overplace it. You don't want to go crazy. Typically I do around the ears. I do the middle a little bit more, and then around the edge. I do the cheek, I do the nose bridge, and whatever that's called, the little dimple there. I do the lips, not too much, because you're gonna see why later. We're gonna go it again, and that looks pretty good. Now for the second layer, switch to your tan, and everywhere there's a bright spot, you're gonna wanna paint it until it's not bright. Now, definition of non-bright is subjective, but eyeball it. You'll get good with it once you know what to look for. For example, I think this looks good. Now, this is for the purposes of making the lighting less drastic and making the next step better. Okay, there we go. Now, we're on soft light now. So switch your blending mode on your brush to soft light. Keep the opacity, don't alter it. And then switch back to red. And now you're gonna paint everywhere that used to be painted, just broadly. Everywhere that you painted with red, you're gonna wanna repaint it with the soft light. And this will give it another shade of red there. And then finally with the last one, you wanna just take a pretty big brush. By the way, I'm using Alt and drag and right click to resize my brush on the fly. You just do single strokes across and then one sort of smudge in the middle. And there you go. That's your skin. Now when we activate it, you can sort of see it's not as bad. Now let me just make sure this looks right. The next step will usually fix any sort of slight imperfections, but you just want it to be a difference, because if there's no difference, then the AI that we'll be using will think that it's just a rimless, lensless glasses, which I don't think there were hipsters in the Japanese army, so. Well, let's do Control-Shift-E, Control-A, and Control-C. And what I typically do is I go into a server that I'm able to send something in just to keep it. And I just copy it in. And now the next step, you're going to require a phone or a phone emulator on computer. And you're going to want to download two apps. One is called Remini or Remini. It's Remini, and it's primarily used for enhancing old photos and fixing their damages and their imperfections. So what are imperfections we can see already? We can see there's these large lines that go down vertically, usually from copying or whatever. It will work to fix those, or at least make them less pronounced. It'll also work to highlight the features of the face that were brought out by this process. So it'll make his eyes more pronounced, it'll make the glasses more properly integrated, and it'll even make parts of the uniform more uniform. If that makes sense, you'll see. Okay, so here we have the Remini picture. And you can see it did exactly what I said. It fixed the vertical lines, brought out the glasses, made the uniform more sharp. But there's some notable things that we need to fix. So first and foremost, the background is all wonky. Doesn't fit with what it used to be. So let's do a repeat of what we did at the start. Let's select subject and just cut him out. Control-Shift-I, and he's cut out. And now let's do an 80% brush, 80% eraser. And because my style has a vignette, it corrupts the vignette around the edges, so let's fix that. And let's just see if there's any parts that kind of stick out as not looking too great. So I've noticed this already. Let's bring that back. And let's maybe okay, that looks about right. Now Control-Shift-E again and it'll combine everything. Now let's bring the Faceapp. The Faceapp. Face. Select subject. Oh, we got a perfect selection. Let's do the same thing, except more judiciously because Faceapp tends to corrupt the uniform more, makes it very ultra smooth for whatever reason. Also seemed to cut off his hat. Okay, so parts of this that I like some of the glasses. I don't like that it made that super weird. Okay, so let's kind of, all right, that looks about right. I like what it did to his eyes. Let's keep that. I like what it did to his ears, but it kind of messed up the bottom, so let's fix that. We're kind of just cutting out the parts that we don't like. So it improved his, it kind of messed with his jawline. You want to kind of keep the jawline the same because it makes the person look very similar. It slightly altered his nose. Okay. Made his lips slightly lower. I didn't really add very much to them, so let's bring it back. And now I think that's enough for that. And now let's do the aged up version. I always tend to copy the aged up version as well because it likes to add some sort of minor details to the face. So I don't actually need any of the uniform in this guy. Give me a moment. And whatever issues there are, we can always just make it more gradual. So like, it added these laugh lines that I think I'll keep some of. Slight imprint. Kind of made his ears a little more wide. Which I think, if it's looks more well defined. Why get rid of it? But I don't like what it did to his glasses again, so let's snap that back. Kind of didn't change the eyes. It's a very slight change, but it adds more to the image, so why not? And all right, looks like it added a little more shading. Maybe all right, and I think that's done for that. Now the finished product you can enjoy, and that's for sources that are pretty good already. So that's his source had good lighting, it had good shading already. Wasn't too much wrong with it. I'm gonna do a separate video showing how, it's a longer form video and I won't really talk that much, just showing me fixing up and doing a bad portrait source and seeing what comes with it. Because you're gonna be working with a lot of bad portrait sources and you shouldn't shy away from them if it's a good character that you can use in the game. There's always a way to fix them up. We've fixed up, here at our team, we've kind of fixed up everything from postage stamps, paintings, to like very tiny pixelated images, to just sort of kind of messed up, bad lighting, really weird lighting sort of pictures. And they've turned out just fine. Just takes some due diligence and it takes some knowledge of what to do. But yeah, that's gonna wrap it up. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Keep an eye out for more videos like this one on this channel. And happy modding.